Hi, so I'm making a video Substack this week. I want to talk about writing, developing, creating, and implementing your own personal curriculum. And I just thought that making a video was going to be the easiest way to talk about this. I'm obviously going to write down some notes and sort of try to summarize what I'm saying in this video. So if you're like, oh God, I don't want to watch this, you can read down below and I will put everything in there as well as like links to everything that I'm talking about. There's a lot of noise about like new year, new you. And as much as I, love a fresh start, I don't really believe that everything's going to change in the new year. But I do think that it could be a good time to add something into your life as opposed to taking something out. And so that's why I wanted to make this personal curriculum video sort of at the start of the year, so that when we're thinking about goals, we're not thinking about like, oh my God, I'm going to book a series regular this year, if that's an acting goal you have, because that's sort of out of your control. Building yourself to be the kind of actor who could book a series regular, that is within your control. So again, adding into your life as opposed to sort of limiting yourself is the kind of New Year's resolutions, I believe. I care deeply about this, about like self-study, self-actualization, learning new things, building new skills, and I always have, and I just love that like personal curriculum is trending on the internet. It's all over Substack, it's all over Instagram, it's all over YouTube, and I just really like the idea of sort of taking your, I guess, education into your own hands. I think it's a way to make it more accessible and doable, and I don't know, not everyone has a great relationship with like learning in a traditional way via education. I know that I felt dumb for years because I'm still quite bad at spelling actually, but I was really bad at spelling as a kid, and even though I was really great at every other element of like English, for example, I was really bad at spelling. And it made me feel like dumb and put me off. And I think it wasn't until like I got my master's degree that I was like, oh, maybe it's okay that I sometimes spell receipt wrong. So a couple reasons why I care so deeply about a personal curriculum. And why I feel like I'm a person to make a video about it. I've written, rewritten, and developed screen acting curriculum for some of the top drama schools in the UK. And so I've really spent years thinking about how people learn best inside and outside of an institution. So I'm going to talk about this from an acting standpoint, though I do believe this can apply to personal curriculum for like anything, even if you don't think you're like creative, or if you're a writer or a director or a photographer. It's a really great way to stay creative and emotionally and intellectually in shape. So I'm going to talk about how I think it could work and some ways I think you could go about it. If you were an actor who's perhaps not doing full-time education, doing full-time drama school, or who's graduated and you're in between jobs. So making a personal curriculum for that reason. Putting your education, re-education into your own hands. Start with some of the principles that we use in higher education when we're building curriculum. And again, I have been head of screen and worked with curriculum at both Arts Ed and Identity School of Acting, as well as taught at many other drama schools throughout the UK. And I teach writing and I teach acting. A lot of what I see online in regards to personal curriculums is things like, I want to learn Japanese, I want to learn more about frogs, I want to read more classical literature, and I'm going to take a clay workshop. And that's like what someone builds that curriculum around. And there's like some really great videos about it. And that is great. If that works for you, that's amazing. That is expansive and fun and life-giving. And I would 100% recommend it if you're just trying to like expand your research and your interests. But if you're building a personal curriculum as a way to sort of further your education without committing to an institution or to like full-time training, here are some ways that you can sort of like level up your creativity. And again, I'm going to share this sort of from an acting standpoint. So we're going to start with how the institutions structure learning. I'm going to be looking at my notes a little bit here, okay? So one of the biggest differences that I see in sort of the online videos about like creating your own personal curriculum and what I would do writing curriculum and what I have done when I've rewritten screen curriculum is connectivity and sort of interconnectedness between the classes. So in formal training, courses aren't random. They're grouped by like level, tier, year of training, and then subjects are connected or interconnected, and they're designed to build on each other over time. And within a term, they're also designed to interconnect. So like I said before, yes, you could learn pottery and Japanese and read more classical literature, and that would benefit your life completely. And by all means, please do that. But if you want to recreate, I guess, more of a personal curriculum that's inspired by what you might get in higher education, I want to talk about how you could connect it better. So, for example, if one of my classes in the autumn term did, let's say, American dialects, and that's what they worked on for, let's say, 6 to 12 weeks, depending on the class, depending on the module. Then in the spring, so the next term, that work shouldn't just disappear. We shouldn't just do something else completely random. It would be helpful to deepen that and apply that. So that might mean that then we write a class in the spring term that could be like American realism on stage, perhaps, yes? So then we're looking at certain types of plays that may be informed. So if you could then use your American dialects in that class. But how can we extend that training? How can we build on that? Maybe in the following term, we do a module that's like screen acting, and maybe we just look at the scripts of Aaron Sorkin. So now we've embedded things like American accents, some history of playwriting, some, realism, some sort of contextual themes, and then now we're going to put that on screen in like a very specified, stylized way, if you know Aaron Sorkin's work. And that's literally a curriculum that I have written as part of a screen cycle before. The key thing with building a personal curriculum like this is that it's not just throwing paint on the wall and like hoping that you've redecorated your apartment. It's really looking at like, does this class build on what I've just learned, and what is the next logical step, as opposed to just being like, okay, oh my God, I need to learn an Irish accent. I'm going to put that in personal curriculum. You're not sort of result oriented or acting from this place of like, oh my God, I'm lacking this. It's really about like expanding and like building on like what you already have. So we're going to talk about a couple different ways that you could implement this curriculum on your own, through reading, through learning, through online classes, books, YouTube videos. I'm also going to talk about when you might want to outsource some of your learning. So that could be through teachers, tutors, classes, workshops. But just because you're not in a full-time education and you are writing your own personal curriculum doesn't mean that everything has to be self-taught. And this doesn't have to cost like an extortionate amount of money. A lot of this could be free, or maybe there's a small investment that you're going to put into your education. And I also want to encourage you just to like think about your own terms or your own sort of cycles. Most institutions run off of like an 11 or 12 week sort of term. And within that, you might have 1 or 2 modules, like a 6 week or a full 12 week. But like, okay, how long do I want to spend on this particular class? And is there something that I want to outsource? So do I want to do like, I want a workshop, or do I want to do some drop-in classes, or do I want to take like a weekly class to supplement this? Let's always put a time frame to your learning, I would say, to your personal curriculum. Okay, here's an example and sort of like a loose curriculum that I've thought of that could be really interesting. So I think here's a couple things that I, a hypothetical actor, would like to look at and could look at this term, okay? And I'm going to call this term January to April. So that's sort of the time frame I'm giving myself, which is like maybe 14 weeks. Maybe I'm going to call it like 12 weeks. Maybe I'm not going to start this week. Maybe I'm going to wait. I'm going to start the last week of January. Maybe I'm going to take a week off in March. I'm going to be gentle with myself. There's like a softness to a personal curriculum. A couple things I think you could start with. Let's say I want to look at modern female British playwrights. I do some research and I decide, okay, maybe I want to look at Lucy Kirkwood and Morgan Lloyd Malcolm. So then I'm looking at Morgan Lloyd Malcolm's work, and she has a really famous play called Amelia, which, I think I have that actually. So about Amelia Bassarano, who was a contemporary of Shakespeare's. It's a great play. It was at the Globe a few years ago now. She obviously has lots of other fantastic works. The Wasp is very common, very popular. Okay, I'm going to look at modern British female playwrights. So I'm going to look at Morgan Lloyd Malcolm, Lucy Kirkwood. We'll come back to Lucy later. Also, maybe I decide that I want to look at poetry. So now I'm taking myself out of my acting sphere a little bit, but I'm also like expanding my personal curriculum. So maybe I want to explore the poetry of Amelia Bassano. So that's from like the early 1600s. And within that, I could look at her poetry, and maybe I want to compare and contrast that with Shakespeare's poetry. And maybe I decide I want to look at sonnets. Okay, so now I've got one class, which is modern female playwrights. My second class is going to be just the poetry of Amelia Bassano and William Shakespeare. Maybe my third class is I want to look at adaptation. So what happens when a book gets turned into a movie? And I might want to look at this from an acting point of view, a screenwriting point of view, a storytelling point of view, And a good example of this is Hamnet. It's about to come out. Okay, so that's a Maggie O'Farrell novel that was written in 2020. I think it won the Man Booker. Anyway, it's about to be a movie directed by Chloe Zhao. So maybe I decide I'm going to read that book, or maybe I'm going to listen to the audiobook, and maybe I'm going to go see that movie when it comes out. I think it comes out this week or next week. Maybe I'm going to also look at a couple other adaptations. So one thing that I could look at is Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew, and then the 1999 movie 10 Things I Hate About You. So over again, we're talking January to April. I think I'm going to read 1 or 2 books and then watch the movies, or read the screenplays and watch the movies. So let's say we're doing Hamnet, Taming of the Shrew, and 10 Things I Hate About You. I honestly feel like that's enough. Yes? I bet that once Hamnet, the movie, comes out, the screenplay will be available at some point soon. Will be Oscar nominated, and those always become available. 10 Things I Hate About You, that screenplay is available. You can find it on Scriptslug, I think. And obviously, all Shakespeare is public domain, so you can find that online. I'm not reading this in a week. I'm not reading this in a day. I'm like looking at it over a period of time. Maybe I even watch the movie Hamnet first. Then I go away and read the screenplay. Then if I have time, I listen to the audiobook. That's our 3rd class here, adaptation. Okay, and then maybe for our 4th class, I want to work on an acting skill. Okay, so a lot of this has been a bit theoretical, maybe a little bit heady, not very tangible, not very physical. I think a good monologue class that would suit this would be Shakespearean monologues where the women are in disguise. So I would pick Viola, Twelfth Night, Rosalind from As You Like It, and then Julia from Two Gentlemen of Verona. In all of those monologues, those women are disguised as other people, and they usually have some sort of soliloquy in there somewhere about love or about disguise, about being misunderstood. And I think that would then relate quite nicely back to this play and back to the poetry of Emilia Bassano, and possibly back to the movie 10 Things I Hate About You and Hamnet. So now we've got 4 classes. That might be a lot. That might be too many classes, but you've sort of conceptualized these classes. Then you could decide what can you fit into your actual life. Now within that, maybe you are also going to read a couple other plays by Morgan Lloyd Malcolm. So you could read The Wasp, or maybe, like I said, you want to read a couple plays by Lucy Kirkwood, like The Children or The Welkin. I think definitely The Welkin would really, or even The Human Body would really sort of suit some of the things that we're talking about here as part of that original class called British Female Playwrights, Contemporary. And then what you'll start to see is the threads that connect different parts of this. So when you work on your monologues, they will be better because you've looked at Renaissance poetry. They will be better because you've looked at modern women's voices. They will be better because you've understood how we adapt stories, so how people change and how people change with other people's texts. Once you've layered your curriculum, so you've thought about sort of modern work, historical work, maybe some performance practice, maybe you have time for more classes, so you want to throw in like an extra British dialect in there. You have time for less classes, so you're going to take the poetry out and just stick to one playwright or one book adaptation. Whatever you're going to do, now you have your hypothetical 4 classes, and we have a hypothetical term, which is, let's say, January to April. Now I'm going to look at my life and say, okay, how the heck do I fit that in? So I might look at my schedule and say, okay, I have some time on Monday morning and I have some time on Friday afternoons. Maybe that's all the time I have, okay? Or maybe you have a Saturday morning and a Sunday afternoon. Or maybe you have a lunch break. You have an hour and a half lunch break every day or something. Or you have a Tuesday evening and a Friday morning, or whatever it is that you have. It doesn't have to be every single day, but I do think it's good to sort of block this out in your calendar. Now, I might decide I'm going to spend 4 classes. I'm going to do half an hour on each class. So 2 hours Monday, 2 hours Friday on my education. That feels like a lot of chunky learning, but that might work for some people. Alternatively, if I have lunch hours, I might spend 4 lunch hours, half an hour on each class, 4 days a week. Or I might decide Mondays, I look at 2 classes, Fridays, I look at 1 class, and I alternate that every other Friday. So for example, the book, it's going to take me a while to read a book. So maybe that class I only have every 2 weeks. Maybe the monologues I work on for 10 minutes a day. So that's a different type of like commitment. If I'm reading a play, maybe I decide I'm going to dedicate 10 minutes a night to that play. and I slowly read it between now and April, or however many plays I can get through. I think it's also important to take some notes. I think it's important for you to like decide, if you're committing to this personal curriculum, to like put a little bit of like analog effort into it. So again, you could read this online, you could buy it, you can read a lot of poetry online, you can read a lot of stuff online for free. I would invest in a notebook. It could be £1, it could be £10, it could be 20 quid, I don't really care, but I think it's important to have a notebook. You could section it out if you wanted, or you could treat it more like a commonplace book where you sort of just make notes as you go. But I would love you to start to like weave these classes together, because this would naturally happen in higher education. So you'd be taking a class on, like I said, American realism and American dialects, and your tutors would be like, hey, this could be really helpful over here. Maybe you want to use this in that class. Maybe you want to do this over here, and da 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 da. The other thing you could decide is, okay, let's say I'm going to do 10 minutes a day, 3 days a week on my monologue, but once a month, I'm going to take a workshop, some kind of acting workshop. I'm going to take whatever I've learned in that workshop and I'm going to bring it back to my monologue practice. So I have a new way of looking at those 3 monologues. You know, maybe I look at one monologue for a month, so on and so forth. The other thing you could do is you could decide, okay, I really need some help with an element of what I'm doing in this curriculum, and I want to do like a weekend workshop. I'm doing a lot of heady work, and I decide I need to do a more physical, tangible workshop. That could be a movement workshop, that could be like an emotionality workshop. So that's going to take up, I don't know, 10 to 12 hours of curriculum time. So maybe the weeks around that in March, I cut back down on my curriculum time. I just do some reading. Maybe I take a break from my monologues. Or maybe if I'm looking at the poetry, let's say that's class number 2, I'm only going to do that for 4 weeks in January, and then I'm going to let that class go. So that's just going to be a short little baby class within this personal curriculum. So you thought of your sort of 4 classes, maybe thought about your scheduling, you thought about, okay, this is how much time I have between now and April. I want you to think about going into an interest spiral. Remember when you're like a kid, kids have this very interesting way of learning. So kids like dinosaurs, and all of a sudden they become obsessed with dinosaurs and they know like everything about them. I want you to try to like find your way back to that a little bit, that of hunger, that like I'm going to become a little bit obsessed with something. You could do this for 4 classes, or you could just like dial it way back and just pick like one of these 4 classes that I've talked about. Do that from now until March, do another one April to June, so on and so forth, okay? But here's a little bit of a structure that I want you to follow, okay? So week 1, I want you to sort of immerse yourself, okay? And maybe you want to do this for 2 weeks. You decide again how long you're going to plan this curriculum out. So this is the time to like deep dive into your topics, read, watch, observe, listen. And I definitely do that for week 1, week 2. So you're not trying to achieve anything yet, okay? We're kind of like immersing. In week 2, 3, I want you to think about connecting the threads. So this is where having that notebook would be really helpful. So looking for patterns, looking for overlaps, connecting ideas across mediums. Oh, okay, when I listened to that poem and I watched that section of that film, it really made me think about this part of this monologue, and what could they be going through? While you're connecting threads, also looking for, and this is really important, holes in the education, holes in the curriculum, so that you can then either add that into your personal curriculum for the next quarter, or possibly look at something that you can input in this learning sphere. Like I said, which is maybe a workshop, maybe a book. So then the next section, so now I'm thinking sort of weeks 5, 6, is I want you to like have some interaction, okay? So one of the things that's really hard when you're doing your personal curriculum is you don't have classmates, you don't have someone to like share it with. I think it's really important to share your discoveries. So you could do this with Substack, you could do this by having coffee with a friend. Maybe you want to create this curriculum, a friend creates their own curriculum, you get together and like compare notes. I just think it's really important at some point in the sort of 5, 6, 7 week mark to share. Discuss, celebrate, recognize that you're kind of learning something, because this would be a point in higher education where we would do a check-in. You do a check-in with a tutor, you would be looking at sort of what's going well, what you need to improve upon, and you kind of need to do that for yourself. Now, in the last sort of 4 to 6 weeks of your term, whether you're doing sort of 3 or 4 months, or sort of the last half, I want you to start creating something. And this is different than sharing. So there may be a concept that is similar between the two. Let's say you want to share on Substack. Maybe there's some creating in there. I want you to think about creating something with what you're learning. So maybe you try writing a poem. This you don't have to share with anyone. Maybe you record one of your monologues as a self-tape. Again, you don't have to share this with anyone. Maybe you look at one of your favorite books and you think about, how could I turn that into a scene in a movie? You don't have to physically write it down. Just close your eyes, sit down for a half an hour, 15 minutes, imagine it filmed like a movie, so that you're working the muscle of creativity. And this may actually lead you to writing something, filming something, drawing something, designing something, performing something for other people, but it should feel separate than sharing your discoveries. So sharing your discoveries is sort of an element of the research and of the learning, and creating is more personal. It's for yourself. And this also will depend on sort of like how much time you're putting in each week. It might be super small, it might get bigger, it might be really hard and scary and challenging. It probably will be, actually. But so would higher education. There would just be someone there who's sort of like pushing you in that direction. So, a couple of takeaways. Your personal curriculum should be alive, and it should be flexible enough that it can allow you to kind of like spiral, connect, create. And I want you to feel like you can celebrate learning and not worry about the outcome and the result as much of that. I also really want to reiterate that like a small time commitment is also okay, especially if you think about doing this sort of over 3 or 4 months. 10 minutes a day, maybe Mondays and Tuesdays, you read a play. Thursdays and Fridays, you read a bit of a book or a screenplay. And on the weekend, you like break down the text of a monologue. And then you do the same thing the following week. It will build up over time. And then maybe you're like, hey, I have a whole Saturday afternoon free. I can go to this exhibit, or I'm going to take that workshop, or pulling it in where you have time and not adding like weight to your shoulders with like, oh my God, I have to learn this by this time. Personal curriculum is supposed to be flexible. Oh, I want to read more plays by this playwright and less by that playwright. Great. Tweak your class. It's important to get a little bit uncomfortable. So don't quit the second things get tough, but do understand that like if this isn't filling you with joy, there are other things that you could be learning and that you might want to go in that direction. Okay, so let's say you've completed this random 4-course personal curriculum that I just wrote. What do you do next? So then I want you to think about, okay, cool, I've done that for 3 months. I'm planning my next curriculum. What could I do to build on what I just studied? So we looked at contemporary female British playwrights. So I would say next semester of your personal growth, personal curriculum, why not look at mid-20th century female playwrights, American? So you're switching it up. You're going to do something else. So perhaps you want to look at Lillian Hellman, brilliant playwright. I would highly recommend The Children's Hour and Little Foxes. Now with that, you might decide, okay, I'm going to take an accent class, an accent workshop from an external teacher. Maybe it's a one-off, maybe it's 6 weeks, maybe it's 5 weeks, maybe it's an online thing, maybe you find a course of YouTube videos that are free. What could complement that mid-20th century playwright? Last 2, I think it'd be really interesting to look at something a bit theoretical, because we didn't do anything too theoretical in our previous term. So I think maybe looking at queer theory, the camp aesthetic, and sort of how that came about and how that influences film and television of today. Maybe you just want to make yourself like a movie watching list. So this curriculum could literally just be like watching films. Maybe you read Camp by Susan Sontag. Maybe you look for ways that these themes can tie into those plays that I just mentioned. And possibly you want to look at, again, sort of a more acting technique style. So the psychology of acting. So you decide, okay, you're going to do a bit of research into Jungian archetypes and maybe like their influence on character. Maybe you do one class on each archetype and you work on like physically embodying that. You can find a list of these archetypes online. Where could I see that in these different plays that I'm reading? Where could I see that in these films that I'm watching? So again, that's sort of 3 different classes that you could take there, plus maybe you want to do a voice class, or maybe you want to do a workshop, or maybe you want to watch some YouTube videos, or maybe you just want to learn how to crochet, and that is also cool. Your personal curriculum doesn't always have to be just revolving around this one thing to improve yourself, but I want to encourage you that instead of it being so random, that it's more interdisciplinary and connected, because that's the kind of screen curriculum I've written in the past, and that is how I've seen the most growth in my students. Okay, that was a lot of talking. I don't know if you're still with me, but the final thing that I want to reiterate is that this shouldn't be about lack. We shouldn't be, I lack this skill and I need to fill it. But this should be about your personal choices, your things that get you excited. It's a personal curriculum. So yes, there are things that you are always going to need to improve upon as a writer, as a director, as an actor, whatever it might be. Personal curriculum is more about finding joy and kind of like coming back to the education, not from a negative place, but from a curious place. And with that, I do hope you also seek out opportunities for feedback. That's why taking classes or taking workshops can be really helpful, because there is always room for improvement, but I feel like that should almost be part of your personal curriculum, but in the sense that it's like not the only thing that you're doing. The only thing you're doing is like, oh my God, I've heard that I like don't have any rhythm when I'm talking, so I'm gonna take a voice class. I feel like your approach to the voice class won't be as joyful and fulfilled as if you take the voice class because you want to learn a dialect that connects with the kinds of plays that you're reading, or you want to take a voice class to work on your resonance because you've been reading poetry and Shakespeare, or you've been told you're rigid. Okay, instead of taking a movement class because you've been told you're rigid, can you take a movement class and then like fit it into your life and into your curriculum? Maybe the only other class that you're taking in your personal curriculum is like, I don't know, reading Anton Chekhov. Great, cool. Then how can I maybe explore some Michael Chekhov in a movement class so that you're blending things together as opposed to compartmentalizing your creativity so much? I also do want to talk about a couple classes and workshops because it would be amiss for me to not mention them. I really believe in continuing your training. I have been a professional actor since I was 5. And I've been a filmmaker and working professionally in the industry for over like 16 or 17 years as an adult. Sometimes you work a lot. Sometimes you have tons of auditions. Sometimes things are like busy and booked. And sometimes there's a lag, or sometimes you're in between projects. And I think that the system of sort of only training once and then like trusting that you will work is of a days gone by. And that the concept of like continuing to work this muscle of both creativity and learning and curiosity and expansion is kind of the way forward for any artist and any like multi-hyphenate, which is sort of what I believe most of us have to be these days. A couple things I think are really great. Drop-in classes are great. So there's some really great ones. Obviously, I live in London, so I will link some below. So those are helpful. Those can fit around your life, and they're usually, though a bit more expensive, like by the hour than a committed class, they can really just fit in if you're kind of like, I don't have time or finances to commit to something longer. Another great option is doing a sort of a weekend workshop. So there's an amazing workshop coming up in March called React by a director I know, Richard Elson. He's fantastic. And it's more of an immersive workshop. It's like a weekend away in Norfolk, I think, and working on your emotionality. And if you're an actor who needs sort of help accessing that, that's a great way to do it. It's a hard thing to access in class because you're sort of in class and then you go do your life, and in class and then you go do your life. So maybe you decide, okay, I really want to be able to access my emotions further and deeper, and that will really expand my work. I'm going to plan to do something like a weekend workshop and then build my personal curriculum around that. So maybe before that, I'm going to read one play and learn one monologue. And afterwards, I'm going to be like, okay, how can I apply this skill set to that monologue? And now I'm going to read a different play and see if I look at it differently. So again, it doesn't have to be all 4 classes I suggested earlier. It could be 1 or 2 classes that you come up with, and then something that you outsource to a professional. If you are looking to build your self-tape skills, I teach screen acting at my school, Driving Force Acting School, and we do have a 12-week audition focused screen class coming up. It starts on the 15th of January and it runs for 12 weeks, and it's every Thursday night. It's not really like any other acting class I've seen anywhere or taken anywhere, because every single week I give you a new audition and you have to come in and do it. And it's really building up that muscle of auditioning. So if you find, okay, I don't need to work on monologues because I feel like I've had a lot of prep for that, maybe you want to look at self-taping, and then in and around that, you decide, okay, maybe every other week I'm going to read a new screenplay, or every other week I'm going to read a new play. And then maybe, so you've got a class that you're outsourcing, self-tapes, let's just say, once a week, that's going to require a certain amount of homework, probably a couple hours, memorizing, working, choices, physicality, character, etc., etc. Then something like reading, which you could do throughout the week. I'm going to read every 2 weeks. I'm going to try to read a play. I think that's pretty generous. You probably do that. And then maybe I'm going to pick up a new acting book. Stanislavski Toolkit is fantastic. Impro by Keith Johnson would highly recommend. Okay, I can't just like keep looking at my books, obviously. But I just want to say that it's important to think of like integrating different structures into your personal curriculum. So maybe there's something that you do daily, like reading a play every 2 weeks. A different class, a different script every week, like in Self-Tape Momentum class that I mentioned. That's a different pace, that's a different rhythm, that's a different skill set. Then maybe you decide you're going to work your way through all of Hamlet's soliloquies over the next 3 months, and you dedicate an hour once a week to look at that. So you're fitting it in and sort of thinking about deep long-term learning and small tangible learning and how you can combine the two into your own personal curriculum. Training should enhance your personal curriculum. It shouldn't be a burden, and it shouldn't like replace your like self-directed focus and exploration. It should expand on it. And again, I don't want you to be taking a class from a place of lack, but from a place of curiosity and excitement. Yes, I will link my self-tape class below. I will link the amazing workshop React by Richard below. I'll link a Meisner class I think is fantastic below. I'll link some of the plays that I've talked about, some of the books I've talked about, anything else. And maybe also a couple videos on personal curriculum that are like a little less chaotic than this one. And yeah, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful week and welcome to 2026.